and it should be recording now. All right. Well, hello and welcome everybody to what I believe is the 20th episode of Hell in a Handbasket. It might be the 21st, where, you know, it's the 20th. I hope so. So today, we kind of had some debate about what we should cover this week, and we decided it might be a good idea to take a look at Lavrov's interview with Face the Nation, seeing as the last episode we tried to get through as much of Zelensky's interview with 60 Minutes, just to compare and contrast the differences, right? Because, I mean, that's the official spokesman for the Ukrainian side, and this is going to be an official spokesperson for the Russian side. So let's just take a look. Because, I mean, I've seen certain clips of this interview, but I have not seen the whole interview yet. So this is going to be my first full watch through. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that it's running at a faster speed. Playback speed.
Yeah, I did watch. Yeah, let's.
You did what?
A bit. I did watch the whole thing the other day, so this will be number 2 for me. I did watch this the other day, the full thing, so this will be number 2 for me.
I see. Let's go.
Rarely give interviews to U.S. media outlets, but we were able to speak with Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov exclusively from Moscow on April 24th. Before the cameras.
Oz. I love how she says the Russians rarely give interviews. No, lady, it's the other way around. You rarely ask. But I love how she started it off the interview by framing it that way, right?
Yep. Just an assertion that is completely baseless. How many hoops did Tucker Carlson have to jump through to get an interview with Vladimir Putin? It was notorious that the NSA spied in on his Signal chat, all this stuff. Yeah. So yeah. Oh, the Russians don't want to give interviews. When was the last time we gave an interview? An official spokesperson gave an interview to any Russian media, right? And not only that, but as we'll see, Lavrov answers these questions in English. That's not his native language.
Yeah, I'll give her credit though. That's a sharp-looking suit.
Yeah.
We asked him to keep his answers short. He made the point throughout the interview that he was trying to do just that. We go now to Russia's Foreign Minister, Sergey Lavrov. Good morning, Minister Lavrov. I want to ask you about what happened in Kyiv. There was a large Russian attack on that capital city about 1 o'clock in the morning. President Trump has said publicly the Russian strikes are not necessary and very bad timing. Vladimir, stop, was his quote. What made it worth killing civilians when Ukraine says it's ready for a ceasefire?
How's that for a question?
We only target military goals or civilian sites used by the military. President Putin expressed this for so many times. And this is not different this time as well. We never consciously target civilian sites, unlike the Zelensky regime.
So was this an intentional attack then, not a mistake?
If this was a target used by the Ukrainian military, the Ministry of Defense, the commanders in the field have the right to attack them.
So just to be clear,
So just a really quick point, we see this a lot where Sergey Lavrov is not privy to all of the most up-to-date information. One example, there's been many examples, but one that really stuck out to me because I ended up looking like an idiot for it, was he was sure the Russians would not invade. He's like, well, we amassed troops on the border before. So I think that they keep the diplomats not always up to date with all the stuff that's going to be going on in terms of the military. That's how it seems to me.
When the president of the United States says Vladimir, stop, is this a rejection of that request? Or was the assessment that because of what you say regarding the concerns that this loss of civilian life made it worth it?
When I started drinking warm water to help me lose weight,
I found out
my friends laughed.
Work because warm water is not sufficient to lose weight. You also have to do it.
Well, I can assure you that
I also put vodka in it.
When I started drinking warm water to lose weight, it started making a difference, but it really changed. It was a game changer as soon as I started putting some cocaine into there. I lost pounds in weeks.
Was not something absolutely civilian like a TV center in Belgrade in 1999. this was an intentional attack against civilian target. In our case, we only target those sites which are used by the military. And regarding the ceasefire and regarding the call to stop, President Putin immediately supported President Trump's proposal a few weeks ago to establish a 30-day ceasefire, provided we do not repeat mistakes of the last 10 years, when deals were signed, and then Ukraine would violate those deals with the support and with encouragement from Biden administration and from European countries. This was
this is a point that, like, you listen to Western analysts, they always bring this up. The Russians can't be trusted; they break their deals. But Lavrov is actually right. It's been us, it's been our side that's been non-agreement capable.
Was the fate of the deal of February 2014. Then this was the fate of the Minsk agreements, and this was the fate of the deal reached on the basis of Ukrainian proposals in Istanbul in April 2022. So President Putin said, ceasefire, yes, but we want the guarantees that the ceasefire would not be used again to beef up Ukrainian military, and that the supply of arms should stop.
Ukraine accepted on March 11th that idea of a U.S. brokered ceasefire without preconditions. You're saying the preconditions are a negotiation to end something else?
No, it is not a precondition. It is the lessons learned after at least 3 times. The deals similar to the one which we are discussing now.
Yeah. But Russia has not accepted that call for a
Ukrainian
ceasefire.
regime with a strong support from European capitals and Biden administration. If you want a ceasefire just to continue supply arms to Ukraine,
Right.
so what is your purpose? You know what Kaya Kallas said?
So that's the part that's one of the clips that I'd heard. That's the one that I heard making the rounds, where he's pointing out this is the European plan is to get a ceasefire and rearm Ukraine. If that's your plan, why would we ever agree to that? We're just going to keep grinding forward. And he's right.
And what's his name? Mark
Well,
Rutte said about the
NATO Secretary
ceasefire.
General.
Pause that for a sec. This is such a disingenuous interview too, because it's almost as if they're completely ignoring everything that the Russians have publicly said about the ceasefire. So the Russians were very clear, like on day one, we're not agreeing to this ceasefire because of all of these outstanding questions. Like, how is the ceasefire going to be? Like, they listed a bunch of, how did Putin phrase it?
Realities on the ground?
No, not reality. He used a certain phrase but basically what he said at the time was, we've got a bunch of questions about this potential ceasefire and how in practical terms it would work. Here's our concerns, and he laid out a bunch of concerns. And nobody's ever returned to that. Nobody's ever addressed the concerns. Nobody's ever said, oh yeah, Putin has some concerns that we need to address. It was as if they all just completely ignored what he said. And here we are like a month and a half later, and this silly twit is completely ignoring what she knows is true. Like, you can't tell me that she doesn't know.
I think that she doesn't. I think that these people are completely hook, line, and sinker, totally believing their propaganda. They're huffing their own propaganda. They're huffing it hard. I mean, if the Petraeuses and the Ben Hodges of the world huff the propaganda, you think she's not huffing the propaganda? It's easy to believe whatever your job depends on, right? How does that saying go? Like, it's remarkably, I can't remember. Well, the gist is that basically it's easy to believe in something that your livelihood depends on, especially if you're making millions of dollars. What do you have to gain by being an actual journalist? Actual journalists like Aaron Mate, they have to work for a living. These people just show up and they get makeup artists to put makeup on them, and
Yeah, I get all that. I just, a woman like this, I don't know what her name is, but she's only going to ultimately end up looking silly, because
Margaret Brennan.
Okay, never heard of her, but
I've seen her.
Like, if you do call yourself a journalist and you are on a show called Face the Nation, which is a fairly recognizable show, and you're going to have the foreign minister of your enemy on, and you're not going to do the basic, like the slightest modicum of research on the issue, well, you're either horribly bad at your job, or, like I said, you're being disingenuous. I tend to agree with you. I think she knows where her bread is buttered, and she's playing the towing that media line, because they're everybody in the media is a whore now. But
she's willingly ignorant.
Sure.
She'll fight to the death to not have to admit what, as long as you don't have to admit it, there doesn't have to be that much cognitive dissonance. You just don't know. You just listen to your experts.
Eventually the truth does come out. And when it does come out, you will look stupid. And so this woman,
when did they ever pay for them?
I
They
guess
were wrong about COVID all over the place. Have they paid for that? No. You know who paid for being right about COVID? People like Joe Rogan.
Sure.
So I don't know. I think that she's safe. She has the ultimate parachute. She can do whatever she wants as long as she can toe that line convincingly. And
I don't know, man.
Good liars know that you have to believe your own lie if you're going to be, or be very close to it if you're going to be really convincing, right?
Well, this is what we talked about last week with the 22 minutes interview that we talked about last week. 22, is that what it's called? Or 60 minutes, not
60.
22 minutes.
But we watched about 22 minutes of it.
Yeah. But these shows like the 60 Minutes, the Face the Nations, these are shows that have been around for decades, and they're playing to
especially 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes they helped popularize the pop news genre.
Yeah. Oh, and Face the Nation's been around too. Like if you're a political junkie, you've been following Face the Nation forever. But
60 Minutes was like pretty old. I think it's the first. I think it's the OG one. But anyway, sorry.
Go
ahead.
And same with Face the Nation. It's been around for a long time too. And similar to what we said last week about 60 Minutes, I think the target audience for Face the Nation are all these boomers who, you're right, probably they're buying into the propaganda that she's selling them because they don't know any better, because they don't have any sort of intellectual curiosity to check other places.
Yeah, they're defiant in their ignorance, kind of.
They bluntly stated that they can support only the deal which, at the end of the day, will make Ukraine stronger, would make Ukraine a victor. So if this is the purpose of the ceasefire, I don't think this is what President Trump wants. This is what Europeans, together with Zelensky, want to make out of President Trump's initiative.
Will Russia continue targeting Kyiv despite President Trump saying, Vladimir, stop?
Yes.
Like you see what she's doing. She's saying, will you continue to disrespect Donald Trump?
Sure.
Well, as if you don't disrespect Donald Trump, as if your entire network isn't constantly disrespect. Like, shut up. Don't even get out of here.
Listening to me. We will continue to target the sites used by the military of Ukraine, by some mercenaries.
That's just really badass on him. Like, look at how he just freaking.
Despite President Trump saying, Vladimir, stop.
You're not listening to me. We will continue to target the sites used by the military of Ukraine, by some mercenaries from foreign countries, and by instructors whom the Europeans officially sent to help target Russian civilian sites. If you take a look at the situation in the Kursk region of Russia, for example, there is no single military target for the last 6 months which the Ukrainians would fire at. And there was also a proposal by President Trump, immediately supported by President Putin, to have a 1 month moratorium on the attacks on energy infrastructure.
Right,
We've
that's
never
expired.
violated this commitment of President Putin, and Ukrainians.
Yeah, and I think this is really important that Lavrov is out there and he's actually saying the thing. That's what Vladimir Putin did not do in his interview with Tucker Carlson, right? Where Lavrov is saying, the side that violated the ceasefire is the other side, right? You can disagree with him. You can say it's Russian propaganda, he's lying or whatever, but he's saying it. He's doing the thing that Vladimir Putin thinks is useless to do. Because Vladimir Putin thinks it's not worth to try to appeal.
Watch her body language and watch her tone. She is starting to get increasingly frustrated. Like you can tell that this interview is not going the way that she thought it would. She thought that she was going to throw him the oh, are you disrespecting Trump? And a guy like this was gonna, oh well, we would never do that, you know. Like
Well, then
she doesn't,
how are you doing this?
she clearly doesn't know who she's dealing with. She's clearly unprepared, and he's kind of, I wouldn't say he's making her look foolish, but he's certainly winning the debate. And she's not liking that. And you can
Well, it
tell it
shouldn't
just
even
watch
been
her
a
tone.
debate. He's winning
just
the
watch her tone.
interview. He's winning the interview. How is an interview supposed to be something you're supposed to win? Because it's obviously an adversarial interview. Like, I guess I'll be paying attention to her tone.
Violated what Zelensky seemed to support several hundred times. And I sent to Marco Rubio and to the United Nations the list of those attacks. It's really very, very telling and eloquent.
She's trying to cut him off.
Ukraine
Yeah. And we have receipts. The cheaters were the other guys, and we have receipts. So he's saying this to the audience that actually believes. Who's the most likely to actually believe propaganda? It's those boomers we always talk about.
And you'll watch her show increasingly now start to go, try to cut him off, because she doesn't like, again, she doesn't like what he's saying. She doesn't like the fact that he has the facts and she doesn't. And so now she's going to try to deflect in any way she can. And she's going to get more and more frustrated.
I think you're giving her more agency than she deserves, but we'll see.
Disputes that. But putting that aside, I want to ask you about what President Trump said on Wednesday. The president of the United States says he thinks the U.S. and Russia have a deal. Let's get it done. Does President Putin agree?
Well, the president of the United States believes, and I think rightly so, that we are moving in the right direction. The statement by the president mentions a deal, and we are ready to reach a deal, but there are still some specific points, elements of this deal which need to be fine-tuned, and we are busy with this exact process. And the president of the
It's like he's explaining to her like she's a child.
States did not spell out the elements of the deal, so it is not appropriate for me to do this.
But he did say there was a deal and that he was sending his envoy, Steve Witkoff, to meet with Vladimir Putin Friday in Russia. Is that meeting still happening? And should we expect a deal this week?
I dropped from 198 to 147.
By drinking warm water. Yes.
By putting cocaine on my tomatoes.
On her tomatoes. Okay, you know what? We're on to them. Their diet.
Well, you don't trust the word of the president?
Still happening? And should we expect a deal this week?
Well, you don't trust the word of the president of the United States?
I was asking your president's word. What will he tell the U.S. envoy?
We continue our contacts with the American side on the situation in Ukraine. There are several signs that we are moving in the right direction. First of all, because President Trump is probably the only leader on earth who recognized the need to address the root causes of this.
See, I love how Lavrov is like, oh, you're going to try to get me to say some shit about Donald Trump. Nah, I'm going to stroke his narcissistic ego.
Yeah.
Situation. When he said that it was a huge mistake to pull Ukraine into NATO, and this was a mistake by Biden administration, and he wants to rectify this.
Ukraine's not part of NATO.
Marco Rubio expressed yesterday, I think, also the assessment that the American team now is getting.
She's bringing up a talking point in advance. One of the talking points one of the comebacks is Ukraine's not part of NATO. So,
I don't think
does it fit? Does it fit?
I think because he's mentioning how Ukraine was trying to get into NATO, and because she's so stupid, she didn't pick up on that. So she automatically gut-wrenched, Ukraine's not part of NATO, but she never actually listened to what he said.
She's not. She doesn't care what he's saying, dude. She's got somebody in her earpiece, and they're telling her now is the opportunity that we have. Like here, we have this list of pre-planned things that we want to say. Why do you hate Donald Trump, and why are you so disrespectful towards him? Right? Why do you break all your deal? Blah blah blah. She has certain things she wants to bring up in front of her audience to make her look like she's being very tough and adversarial with him. So he's not.
I will give her credit though. That is another nice suit.
I mean, anyways, basically, she's trying to hold up. Oh my God, hold up! I have to disable the trackpad because my cat is going to start clicking on stuff. And on Windows, it's called touchpad. All right, there we go.
The American team now is getting a better understanding of the Russian position and of the root causes of this situation. One of these root causes, apart from NATO and creation of direct military threats to Russia just on our borders, another one is the rights of the national minorities in Ukraine. Everything Russian, media, education,
he's trying to shut him off right now. Trying to shut him off right now.
Culture, anything was prohibited by law in Ukraine. And to get out of this crisis, you cannot just forget about human rights. Whenever we discuss,
it's not illegal to speak Russian.
See, that's another talking point. So even when, see, does it fit? Does it not fit? If it kind of sort of fits,
anything.
Okay.
American negotiation.
Oh my gosh, Kat, listen, I just disabled the trackpad. So like,
this is such a stupid. Like her talking points are so silly because she's throwing out these red herrings. Like, it's not illegal to speak Russian. Nobody said it was. He never said it was. But it is illegal for children to learn Russian now in Ukraine, right? So they banned that.
Or to speak it in public places.
No, I think you can still speak Russian, but they're making it increasingly more difficult for ethnic Russians to be able to speak Russian, right? But this woman, like, she's just throwing out these red herrings because he, like I said, he's got the command of the facts, and he's talking about history right now that she doesn't want people to know about.
It's not that she doesn't want people to know about it. The way it seems to me is that it doesn't matter how he's going to answer, right? She has pre-planned talking points already. The questions are pre-planned. She's going to try to frame questions in a way that's like, rhetorical questions that basically try to paint him in a bad light. When it's not working out, what she's going to do is she's going to move on to the next one. And every opportunity that she gets to throw in one of those talking points, Ukraine's not part of NATO. What was the last one that she said? Hold up, let's hear it again.
To speak Russian.
Oh yeah, it's not illegal to speak Russian, right? Those, like you said, like the red herrings, because that's not the exact debate, right? But if you're watching this, then and you're against Lavrov, right? You think, here we have one of these bad guys here. She's really drilling down on him. You're going to catch on her talking points, and you're going to those are going to be the ones that stick out to you. Those are going to be the ones you're going to accept as your own, right? So the fact that Lavrov is just is being calm and completely being freaking jujitsu ninja with words right now in this non-native language, I think that shows a lot, and it'll probably but in terms of her, she's just moving on when it's not working out. I don't think she even knows that much about it at all.
You cannot just forget about human rights. Whenever we discuss,
and then he brings up human rights, like he uses our own kind of like weapon against Ukraine.
It's not illegal to speak Russian.
Anything American negotiators put on top human rights. They have claims in this regard to China, to us, to anybody. But whenever Europeans and other Western nations speak about Ukraine, nobody can mumble the words human rights. Just nobody. On the contrary, what Ursula von der Leyen and other people in Brussels and in Europe say, that Ukraine is defending the European values. So one of these values is canceling the Russian language. Imagine if
it is
Israel,
not illegal, Minister Lavrov, to speak Russian. The president of Ukraine speaks Russian.
Arabic language in Palestine. Just imagine.
Yeah. You mentioned that the U.S. and Russia need to work on some of these fine points of a deal.
You want the points to be spelled out?
Well, of course, I'd love that. But my question was, European sources say that the U.S. proposal is really just kind of a list of bullet points. Does Russia have details, the details you need at this point, in terms of a formal proposal?
We are really polite people, and unlike some others, we never discuss in public what is being discussed in negotiations. Otherwise, negotiations are not serious. To ask for somebody's opinion regarding the substance, go to Zelensky. He is happy to talk to anybody through media, even to President Trump. He presents his claims.
Well, he said he hasn't received a formal proposal, so I was wondering if you have.
We consider serious proposals. We make serious proposals, and this is a process which is not supposed to be public until the end of it.
Okay, so no deal is imminent.
I didn't say this. Now I understand, by the way, why you wanted to get the brief answers to your questions. You want some slogans to be.
No, the president of the United States said there was a deal with Russia. So I wanted to ask Russia if there is a deal with the United States. So I just want to be clear.
We made our comments on
Busted.
this statement. The negotiations continue, and until the end of the negotiations, we cannot disclose.
He's like, hey, how do you like it when private details are made public? Like, for example, the private details that you wanted brief answers to your questions, and it's obvious why, because you're trying to get talking points, trying to get clippable stuff.
But she's asked him the same question 3 different ways, and he's given the same answer 3 different times.
Yeah, he's never made a clippable answer.
She's not getting it, I guess.
No, she's trying to get a proper response. You can't clip that. Lavrov is being an adult. He's clowning her right now. This is not, try it again. See if we can get a better result, roll the dice again, like it's risk. And if not, move on to the next one.
Is what it is about.
Okay. The National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, said last month that President Trump is asking for thousands of...
See, if she wanted to know the answer to the question, she might have some follow-up questions, right? No. That's not the point of this interview.
Just stop for a second.
We're taking...
I just wanted to make a joke, but okay, forget it. It was a bad joke anyway.
To Russia to be released now as part of what he called confidence-building measures. What steps has Russia taken to meet Mr. Trump's request?
I don't know what this is, like round 4, round 5.
Anyone suffering
from swollen feet. YouTube really sucks at advertising to me.
Look, long before the request coming from Washington, we have been addressing the issue of the fate of the kids who, during the conflict, found themselves outside their homes, outside their families. Most of these kids were attending what you call it, the place where people without parents... Orphanage. And as soon as, and we announce whatever details we have about those kids, and as soon as the parents or other relevant relatives make themselves available, they're getting the kids back. This has been the process for the last almost 3 years between the ombudsman of Russia and Ukraine.
So there's no new release of thousands of Ukrainian children at the request of President Trump?
That's what he just said, yes.
No.
See, this is what I mean. That didn't work. Let's try a different one. Okay, redo the round. Round 1 on this question. Lavrov batted it down expertly. Try again.
But nobody knows why some experts advise the president about thousands of Ukrainian children. Every now and then, once in 2-3 months, we organize exchanges with Ukrainians with the help of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, who do not, make any noise about what they're doing. They just do something which we are participating in a very constructive manner, bringing kids back to their parents or relatives.
But
I love this. He just takes her own talking point and dismisses it before she can weaponize it.
What confidence-building measure can Russia offer now, particularly after this strike in Kyiv, where the president of the United States is saying, Vladimir, stop? How do you convince the United States that Russia is actually serious about peace?
Well,
Vladimir, stop. Oh, what about when Vladimir was saying, guys, stop? We were saying, you, Vladimir.
Building measures have been plentiful in the last 10 years. I mentioned a deal.
The strike was overnight.
You want a brief answer, right? As I understand from your initial words.
Damn, dude.
Or you want an answer which is explaining the situation. The proposal by President Trump on 30 days moratorium on the strikes against energy infrastructure was supported by President Putin and observed strictly. This was a confidence-building measure against the policy and action taken by Zelensky regime. As I said several hundred times, civilian energy infrastructure was trapped. Another confidence-building measure was the proposal of President Trump and his team to resume the deal on Black Sea. And the delegations met in Istanbul, in Riyadh. The delegations exchanged the views how this can be implemented in practical terms, and the proposals made by Russia are being considered by the United States. There are many other examples about confidence-building measure, but if you believe that it's only Ukraine who is interested in confidence building, I think a short answer would be this is an illusion.
Do you take President Trump at his word when he says if Russia is unable to make a deal on ending?
Yeah, dude, I'm impressed. Like, compare this to how Zelensky was answering questions. Like, it seems like Zelensky was hella coached, and Lavrov is like, I guess that's why they call him the boss, right? That's one of his nicknames. Lavrov's just like commanding the room.
The bloodshed in Ukraine,
Well,
who put secondary tariffs.
He's a diplomat, right? And he's one of the best, if not the best, in the world at it. And he's been doing it for 30 years. So this is what you get when you get a career diplomat who's got a pretty good grasp of the issues and is able to, communicate that back to people in their own language, right? Which, like you said, is very powerful. This is what happens when you've got like a real career diplomat versus some comedian or
versus some Tony Blinken, yeah.
Yeah, or just some character, and she's getting decimated as far as I'm aware. Like she's not looking very strong, except for that suit. She's looking good. Keep going.
I think he means sanctions there on oil coming out of Russia. Or do you think that at this point, the relationship between Russia and America has been rebuilt and that won't happen?
Well, I cannot comment on what you think President Trump meant when he said something.
What do you think he meant when he said secondary tariffs on oil coming out of Russia?
Well, we hear many things coming from President Trump. President Trump said that he's sick and tired of the situation in the settlement, especially yesterday when he commented the statements by Zelensky. And President Trump has his own proposals and has his own style in mentioning those proposals in his public speeches. We concentrate, as I said, on the real negotiations which President Trump supports and instructed his people to continue to engage in these negotiations. I'm sorry, the answer was a bit longish, but it's difficult to explain.
He's mocking her.
So,
of course she's upset. He's mocking her.
I ask about the threat of sanctions or secondary tariffs. Because you recently said in an interview, if you had to personally pick sides, you would keep the existing sanctions in place on Russia. You said you've restructured the economy to be self-sufficient, and there is a growing fear that, quote, cunning Americans will lift sanctions all of a sudden to flood our market with services and technologies.
So I don't know if this is supposed to be some kind of reverse psychology, where, because, one of the things that Trump was saying is like, hey, what about sanctions relief? And maybe they're trying to shut down the value of sanctions relief, because there's no way that they don't need some sanctions relief in some places, right? So the fact that they're completely shutting this down as if we're completely not interested in it, I think it shows that they actually are.
So if that's the case, why should the United States consider lifting sanctions at all?
Especially since there was I was reading some news recently, there in some tech news where apparently some spy that was being paid by Russians, allegedly, that's how the story went, was trying to get a piece of high-tech lithographical machinery, and they were thinking that the story was that they were trying to get it possibly for the Russians. So if that's true, the Russians are going to desperate measures because of the sanctions. I'm sure there's a lot of sanctions relief, especially like for the local companies, like people that took over McDonald's business. I'm sure they're happy to be able to continue to have, like, there's winners for sure, but as a whole, it is, I think, damaging to the Russians, the Russian economy. Ooh, it is silent. How's the audio? Is that okay, Nanya?
Yeah, it's good for me.
Okay.
Sanctions at all?
Why do you ask me? You just quoted my statement. And this statement is clear for me and clear to all those who read it. If you have questions to the American side, how they treat the situation, it is not the right address to raise it with me.
So you want to keep sanctions in place? Is that really the Russian position?
I don't want to re-explain what I explained, I think, in quite clear manner.
Damn.
And you quoted, I think, very close to the real content, yeah.
Right.
I think that's the other clip that I saw, apparently him saying this. So I think this is probably the most devastating knockdown of her so far.
I remember that quote, and he was kind of joking because it was in the context of he was asked a question and he said something along the lines of, our economy is booming since they put the sanctions in. And that's a common kind of joke in Russia. Like, from what I understand, it's pretty common in Russia to say, oh yeah, give us more sanctions, you know?
Yeah. Thank you for the sanctions. Thank Joe Biden for the sanctions or something like that. Yeah, I remember.
So that's what Lavrov meant when he said it. And now for some strange reason, you've got this, quote, journalist who is interviewing the foreign minister of Russia. And she thinks that it's a good idea to use the time to ask him such a silly question, right? That just shows you the level of her journalistic level, right? Like, why would you ask the foreign minister of Russia?
Wouldn't it be nice if it was just her level of journalistic integrity and competency? This is the level of journalistic integrity and competency for the entire Face the Nation.
It was a bit longer than normally you prefer. I know.
Well, back in February, though, one of your colleagues, Kirill Dmitriev, who runs a sovereign wealth fund and has been active in the diplomacy with the United States, said something a bit different. That's why I'm asking for clarification, because he said there is the expectation that American companies would return to the Russian market in the second half of 2025.
Well, the president of Russia commented upon this situation. He said that we have nothing against American company, but those companies who decided to leave their business in Russia might find that their place has been occupied already by Russian or other foreign investors.
See, I think that's like hurry, come back before somebody takes your market.
And in this case, we would not make any decisions which would discriminate those who came to invest in Russia instead of Americans. If American companies would like to come to a place which is not yet occupied, if they want to propose a new project on top of the previous business ties, of course we will look into this. And if we find balance of our interests, I think it would be only natural to get into business together.
Well, what areas has the U.S. offered to lift sanctions on? Because it wouldn't be possible for many American companies to enter the Russian market right now.
He already told you 5 times he can't tell you.
It is up to them to decide.
So no offer has been made?
No. How can we offer something?
The United States to Russia.
Well, the United States clearly tells us that they are interested in doing business together. We never reject business proposals provided they're based on the equal opportunities.
Dude, he's speaking to the American audience expertly. Like, if you're an American audience, well, this is following day Bradley. This is editing Bradley. And we experienced some technical difficulties while we were recording our podcast. So as you could probably see from the video before, my goal was to splice these together. As you could see from the video from before, that my cat was messing around with my laptop. So he pressed some buttons on the keyboard and things started to go crazy, started to go haywire. And then after that, funnily enough, Nunya's power went out. So Nunya is without power and he is unable to join. So unfortunately, and so I'm going to be finishing the rest of this episode solo, all by my lonesome. Well, it's me and you guys, I guess. The Hell in a Handbasket audience, such as we have one. So roughly around the 30-minute mark is where it started wigging out. So I ended up pulling up the interview again, anticipating to just start it from there and keep going. But I noticed one interesting thing in the intro, which I probably would not have noticed unless I either watched it again or happened to catch it here, because as we had seen so far throughout this interview, as it's gone, Lavrov has been clowning her, right? He keeps saying, you told me you want to keep the answers short. Well, I'm keeping them short. Do you want me to keep them short, or do you want me to give you a thorough answer? You want them short, right? So, and obviously, as Nanya noticed, she was getting irked, right? He was definitely running circles around her. It was satisfying for me to watch as well. But in the very beginning of the interview, right, where she's wearing this other sharp suit, right? This is obviously not the same day or whatever. She does this disclaimer to basically get ahead of the disaster that this interview is for her.
Russian officials rarely give interviews to U.S. media outlets, but we were able to speak with Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov exclusively from Moscow on April 24th. Before the cameras rolled, his communications team suggested that we ask him to keep his answer short. He made the point throughout the interview that he was trying to do just that.
Dun dun. So you see that where they looked at that interview and they were like, no, you have to have this disclaimer in the very beginning. All this entire time where Lavrov says, you want me to keep it brief, right? She's saying, no. It was you guys who told me to tell you to keep it brief. So I don't really know what to think about that. Here she is basically saying it was Lavrov. Actually, it's not that we had this. We try to set a trap for him and try to set a adversarial interview with him. And if you think about it, keeping responses short, that's something that works very well for adversarial interviews, right? You want to have something that you could clip. Take out of context, slightly out of context, within questionable context, right? So if I had to put my money down on it, I would say that most likely the people interested in short answers were actually them at Face the Nation. I don't think that Lavrov would have. It doesn't seem, but she did mention that it wasn't Lavrov, right? She did mention that it was his communications team. So in which case, how would you even know? But maybe if this is true, if it is the fact that the communications team was the reason why they had this whole brief answers thing going on, then I'm a little bit surprised that she didn't say anything during the episode. Right? Your adversarial interview where you're trying to get brownie points for dunking on, big bad Lavrov. So I don't know. It could be either way. I'm leaning towards they're full of it, but no way I could know. And I generally have that kind of a skeptical attitude. And later on, right after this interview, we'll touch upon another story that Nanya and I wanted to touch upon, but of course he's not here now, which is the North Korean troops in Kursk, confirmed. But let's continue here.
We go now.
Oh wait, it was like 30-minute mark or some shit. Like here somewhere. Let's do 29 minutes. So yeah, unfortunately, you guys are gonna have to do with my commentary and not mine and Nanya's. I'm so sorry. Half of Hell in a Handbasket, half of the basket is missing. You could say it's a basket case.
Safety requirements are fully implemented, and it is in.
Let's restart to like the beginning of this question. Zaporozhye. And the Ukrainians living in fantasy land. Are you kidding me? They're just going to give. I mean, they really want that at power plant. They really, really want it.
In the Arctic.
Right, let's go.
Others in the Russian government have proposed that the U.S. and Russia could work together in the Arctic.
Yeah, we should.
Are there specific
like
areas of discussion for cooperating right now?
You always want me to disclose.
Well, this
things,
is a public statement.
Things which might be discussed by respective officials of Russia and the United States by those who are responsible for trade, economic cooperation, investments, and so on and so forth. How do you expect a participant of negotiations which are still to reach some kind of specific understanding to disclose details in public? It is not serious.
I'm asking what you think the potential is.
So yeah, that's another thing that she always does. When he says, how many times do I have to tell you I can't discuss things of a private nature? She will sometimes do this. I just want to know your opinion. I just want to know what you think. I
read President Trump's book, The Art to Make a Deal. And he does advise to...
Oh, and the mistranslation of the art of the deal, art to make a deal. I wonder if the translation in Russian, maybe he read the book in Russian and he's just interpreting it on the fly in his head, so it's like not exact, you know.
Close information before it's time.
Respectfully, President Trump speaks quite a lot about the things he would like to do with Russia and opportunities to work together.
Respectfully, this has been not respectful at all at any point.
I understand you don't want to. On the specific things President Trump has said in public, one of the things he brought up is that the U.S. could work with Ukraine to operate the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, which is in an area, you know, Zaporizhzhia. Russians.
So she's trying to say Zaporizhzhia because the Ukrainian pronunciation has the I instead of the O. But because for some strange reason, many, especially Americans, don't understand that ZH is a Z sound, like a J, like SH is a sh, so a ZH is a J. So people will just be like Zaporizhzhia because there's a ZH, so it's actually Zaporizhzhia or Zaporozhye.
Control that area right now. Do you agree with President Trump's public statements that the best security would be for the U.S. and Ukraine to operate that together?
Just getting in the earpiece. Confront him, corner him. Do you agree with these public statements? Right?
No, we never received such an offer. And if we do, we would explain that the power station, Zaporozhye nuclear power station, is run by the Russian Federation state corporation called Rosatom. It is being under monitoring of the IAEA personnel permanently located on the site. And if not for the Ukrainian regular attempts to attack the station and to create a nuclear disaster for Europe and for Ukraine as well, the safety requirements are fully implemented, and it is in very good hands.
So that's a no.
Did you not listen to what he just said?
No, I don't think any change is conceivable.
Okay, because that was in a public statement from the White House to
you already said that.
The media.
We as I said, we did not receive any proposal which would be specific. So, you know, I understand that journalists have to speculate.
Well, there's actually, so diplomacy through like official statements and media stories and even less than official statements, it's a real thing, you know. You say something and you know that the people in Russia or in China or in Iran, right, that they're reading your statements, right? It's like we read statements by their officials. So, you know, you go out there and you say, you kind of, throw it out there, see if it'll stick, say it in public first. And Lavrov is saying, we never received a statement, we never received, as far as I'm aware, anything on an official level regarding that. And then she brings up again, well, you know, this public statement thing, which, you know, she's not wrong to say that, yeah, but this public statement shows kind of where Trump's mind's at, right? It shows what we're thinking, what do you think about this? Is this, and what he's saying is, well, because I didn't receive an official thing, I can't really comment on it, but he does actually offer a little bit more this time around, where he says, I can't see there can't be I can't conceive of a change, I can't see how it would give away the nuclear power plant to the Ukrainians. And he says it's under, it's in very good hands. So
we cannot speculate on something which is really not being mentioned during the negotiations.
yeah, so he's being a little he's playing with her.
Zaporizhzhia is not being negotiated right now.
Shall I say that for the third time?
Well, I'm
You
trying to
want-
reconcile public statements. But I heard you, but I just want to be abundantly clear, because that is also widely reported to be in the U.S. proposal currently on the table.
This is what I
Why don't you ask me about President Trump's position on Crimea?
You liked what President Trump said about Crimea yesterday when he said that it had been under.
Why don't you ask me this question? And she doesn't ask the question, right? Notice what she says. She asks him the question. Oh, you like what he has to say. And later, she's going to be like, yeah, so like I said, you like what he had to say.
For Russian control since 2014.
It's not about liking or disliking. It's about the fact that he said the truth.
So he said
And,
something
when-
specific you liked.
When Zelensky said that this is absolutely excluded because Crimea is part of Ukraine according to the constitution, nobody in Europe or in the States, by the way, reminded him that apart from territorial issues, the Ukrainian constitution guarantees, I quote, the free development, the use and protection of the Russian and other national minorities' language in Ukraine. And they guarantee the development of ethnic, cultural, language, and religious identity of all peoples and national minorities in Ukraine. This is also in the constitution, but as I mentioned already, and you decided not to go deeper into this topic, nobody in the West even mentions human rights when they demand that Ukraine defeat Russia in the battlefield.
President Trump said.
Just pointing that out again, man. Like the human rights thing, that's ours. We are the ones that use that, but we can't so much because of what's going on, because of the genocide in Gaza right now, because of what we've done in Ukraine. I mean, we've done some stuff like that before, but I think, Libya and Iraq, we've been at war for like my entire life, right? But I think this specific like moral high ground thing, it really, really took a hit with the Gaza genocide.
Crimea is not even being discussed right now.
Yes, because this is a done deal.
You mean Russia occupies and controls and will not negotiate the future of Crimea? Is that what you're saying?
No, Russia do not negotiate its own territory.
So that's one
And President Trump
specific
understands
thing
this.
that you do want in the public space. You said everything else that I've asked you about in the U.S. proposal is too sensitive to discuss. Is there any other part of the U.S. proposal that you do like?
No. I only commented what was said publicly. And I also said that normal negotiators, I emphasize this once again, normal negotiators do not negotiate through a microphone. They meet and they discuss, they listen to each other, they try to understand, they try to see where points of interest can be reached. And this is how our contacts with the American representatives are organized.
Respectfully, you've been in the top levels of Russian diplomacy for 30 years. This
how many?
isn't for at least 30 years. I mean, you've been in very key diplomatic roles within the top of the Russian diplomatic system for a very, very long time. I don't think any part of this is is typical or normal, to use the word you used. Steve Witkoff is the envoy. Kirill Dmitriev is Vladimir Putin's envoy here. Do you think it's unfortunate that the international system of diplomacy isn't being used more and that it's this kind of one-on-one personal envoy structure?
You did not express your disappointment that the international system of diplomacy was not used for the entire duration of the Biden administration.
No, I was asking whether you were disappointed.
You did not mention that Europeans are really very nervous that they're being marginalized. But I can quote a lot of what Europeans stated. I mentioned already Kaja Kallas and Ursula von der Leyen, who said any deal must make sure that Ukraine is stronger and that Ukraine is on top of Russia. Look, do you need negotiators who believe in this kind of logic and who don't want to look for honest balance of interest? The Trump administration is interested in searching for a balance of interest. They sincerely want to understand better the Russian position, and they're getting this understanding. And we understand better the American position through negotiations and meetings and discussions which we have with them.
Back in January, Russia signed a deal with Iran to become a strategic partner. Would Russia be willing to sever that relationship at the request of the U.S. if it meant better relations with America?
So this
balance of interest, administration is for honest balance of interest.
I think that this is an important point that he's making here, because if we're being objective and if we're being totally honest, right? It's important to take into account Ukraine's interests, the EU's interests, right? But the Russian interests as well. I mean, they're a party to this war. So, I mean, a lot of the times people will be like, well, okay, well, Russia did something bad, so therefore we shouldn't care about their interests. But that's not how geopolitics works, right? That's maybe some kind of a personal moral stance that you could take, that, oh, well, you know, it's not fair and things should be different. But number one, the Russians obviously look at it in a different way, right? And then number two, the unfairness of the Russians kind of rewarding the Russian aggression or whatever, the unfairness of that, right? You can't get butthurt about that, especially if you live out in the West, because how long have we gotten away with like shisty shit? You know, we've done some stuff and we've gotten away with it. Like George Bush is like one of the greatest war criminals of, you know, this century. And what he's not in jail, you know. He gets to live a happy life, and 1.5 million Iraqis are dead because he lied about the weapons of mass destruction and stuff. So, I mean, to be like, don't get your, now this is not the point to get your moral scruples into bunch over, you know, like this is just realistically, you have to take into account the interests of, and weigh them against each other, the interests of all the parties involved, right? If you don't take into account Russia's interests, this is how this whole thing started in the first place. So I think that this is an important point. Like, if the Russians understand that they have to take American interests into account, because, you know, this is our war, this is our proxy war against the Russians, but we also have to take into account Ukraine's interests, and everybody's, Russia's included. It seems like that should be a point that everybody's making. It seems like only people like, well, you know, Donald Trump maybe now is making the point a little bit too, but, you know, that should be common sense, but for some reason it isn't.
The Trump administration is interested in searching for a balance of interest. They sincerely want to understand better the Russian position, and they're getting this understanding. And we understand better the American position through negotiations and meetings and discussions which we have with them.
Back in January, Russia signed a deal with Iran to become a strategic partner.
Moving on.
Would Russia be willing to sever that relationship at the request of the U.S. if it meant better relations with America?
There was never any request like this. And we welcome the process which was initiated between the United States and Iran. We are ready to be helpful if parties believe this can be the case, and they know this.
You were the negotiator back in 2015 on behalf of Russia for that landmark international agreement, the JCPOA.
Joint Comprehensive
And
Plan
part
of
of
Action.
how Russia was helpful was destroying Iran's enriched nuclear material. Is that an offer you would do again?
We were not involved in destroying Iran's nuclear material.
Disposing.
The part of the deal was to move some amount of this material to Russia for.
I think he's reading not just these notes down here, but he's also looking off. Like, I think there's a reason why he nailed this interview this hard. She's not the only person that's with an earpiece. Maybe he doesn't have an earpiece, but maybe he has got like a, oh, they want to bring that up. I mean, I just get that feeling. I can't prove that, obviously, but it just looks like sometimes he looks off when he's like getting certain points, you know, like talking about the nuclear power plant, right? Where he'll be like, it's in good hands. And it still feels like Lavrov. That does sound like Lavrov speaking, but who knows?
Keeping.
Okay. So not destroying, but keeping. Would you keep Iran's enriched nuclear material that they've made in the past few years? Is that an offer to the U.S.?
We are not putting our nose in negotiations between two countries, one of which is not Russia. And I said very clearly, I believe, but you wanted a brief answer, I will have to be longer, since it is not probably getting through. We welcome the dialogue between the US and Iran. We would be certainly ready to help if both parties believe this is going to be useful, and they know that we are ready.
Mm-hmm. Well, back then there were
just pointing out again. Lavrov's version of the story is that they wanted the brief answers, which, like we discussed, I think that they did.
Sanctions and pressure at the UN. It's a very different dynamic now. I want to ask you quickly about nuclear weapons because Russia is such a nuclear powerhouse. According to U.S. intelligence, Russia is developing a new satellite meant to carry a nuclear weapon, which would knock out other satellites and devastate the U.S. if it's used. That's in publicly published material. Does Russia intend to violate past treaties and actually put a nuclear weapon in space?
All right.
Less salt fixes high blood pressure, right? Nope.
So from what I remember watching this interview last time, he's about to raffle stomp her again.
Well,
shit, no, where was it? Oh no. I don't know. I'm just gonna guess, maybe.
Is typical or normal, to use the word you used. Steve Witkoff is the envoy.
Nope.
It's used. That's in.
Gotta be right here. Oh yeah, read some publicly. Okay.
That's in publicly published material. Does Russia intend to violate past treaties and actually put a nuclear weapon in space?
Look how she frames that. Does Russia intend to violate? Does Russia intend to? And
well, before asking this question, you have to check whether this is true or not.
This is what U.S. intelligence says.
U.S. intelligence, I was listening to President Trump about his views of what is the list of achievements of U.S. intelligence, and I have my own facts on which I rely. We have been promoting for many years in the United Nations a resolution prohibiting putting any nuclear weapons
So you just sidestep that
into outer space.
and honed in on where he wanted to go. That was very, very smooth.
The country which is categorically against.
I mean, politicians and diplomats have to know how to do this, and everybody has their own kind of style, and news people too, to a certain extent. But he's definitely very smooth. You could definitely tell he's very experienced. How either he doesn't want to talk about it, or he's not knowledgeable about it, or something. For example, let's say, right? He moves on to what it is that he does want to talk about.
Into outer space. The country which is categorically against it is the United States. At the same time, the United States.
I'll rewind a bit.
List of achievements of U.S. intelligence.
So he's like, yeah, oh man, I heard Donald Trump. So one more time, hits on the Trump point, right? Like I remember during Trump's first administration, they would say, he has to have short briefings with lots of pictures, and it has to say the word Trump a lot of times. So if that's true, I'm sure that with the Russians read our news as well, so they probably have at least that much of an awareness. So maybe this is a way to try to get to him. And he's like, she presses him on the what the intel agencies say, right? He doesn't refute it, and it would take time to refute it, and you'd have to get into the mud. You'd have to be they're lying. Oh no, you're lying. There's instead of doing that, instead of going where she's leading him, he takes the opportunity to say one more good thing about Trump and moves on to what it is that he does want to talk about, which is where the nuclear treaties that the United States is against.
I have my own facts on which I rely. We have been promoting for many years in the United Nations a resolution prohibiting putting any nuclear weapons into outer space. The country which is categorically against it is the United States. At the same time, the United States promotes an approach according to which they want to prohibit putting conventional weapons in outer space. And they cannot answer the question, does this mean that nuclear weapons, they would be planning to move to the orbit? So my answer is very clear. We have been championing in the United Nations a legal prohibition of placing any nuclear weapons in outer space. And the United States, at least during the Biden administration, this was the case. They were categorically against it.
It was the Trump administration's intelligence community that published those findings just a few weeks ago. Are you saying the Trump administration's intelligence community findings are incorrect in regard to Russia developing a new satellite meant to carry a nuclear weapon?
Are you telling me Trump's wrong?
We denied those allegations. We, once again, cannot help repeating, have been promoting for years in the United Nations a treaty, not a declaration, a treaty prohibiting placing weapons in outer space. Mm-hmm. And the United States is against. I cannot comment about the validity of the intelligence reports, as I told you. We never received any facts which would confirm the allegations.
Do you have any interest in arms control talks with the United States?
Yeah, and he redirects back to what I think is hard for the an audience that listens to or watches a news show like this for actual news purposes. I think it's hard for people to hear that and wrap their head around that, right? Because in America, that's not how we think. We think typically that it's always the Russians who can't be trusted, that break their deals, that want to find a way to sneak a nuke somewhere, just like any bad guy, right? So in any scenario, you would probably shoehorn them in that way, right? But to hear that no, we've been trying to do this, even though, let's say, there's a lot of nuance in there, and he's not saying everything, right? And it's more complicated than that, right? But he lays it out and makes it really simple. He says it really starkly, and he says the thing, right? What Vladimir Putin wouldn't do during his interview with Tucker Carlson, what he's doing here is that he says the thing. It's you guys that doesn't do this, and I think that is something that's hard to hear. You either think he's going to be he's lying, or like I think that for an audience of like a Face the Nation audience, I think it's going to be making that point, hammering it home, repeating it is probably really smart, and that's just why I'm saying this interview he came very prepared. There's probably got like coaching, and there's probably people in this room. That's just my guess. So, and it would be smart to do that because she has all the resources at her fingertips, including the ability to edit the video later, right?
With the Trump administration?
It was the United States which broke the process of strengthening strategic stability, and as if the United States is willing to get back to this track, we would see what are the conditions under which this might be possible. As long as in the U.S. doctrinal documents,
Mm-hmm.
we are described as adversary, when the officials in Washington some time ago called us enemy. So we want to understand what Washington thinks of our relationship, and whether Washington is ready for, I would emphasize once again, an equal, mutually respectful dialogue heading to finding a balance of interest. If this is the approach, everything is possible.
See, like it looked like he was reading
Minister,
something.
we are coming up on time,
Like,
but just
reading it off.
before I let you go, from everything you laid out, I haven't heard from you that Russia is willing to make any concession on anything to date.
Again, framing. It's all about the framing.
No, my brief answer is you are wrong.
What concessions has Russia offered?
So that Nanya and I had this debate, and I was telling you the Russians are willing to make concessions, and Nanya was saying, "What? No, they're not." And here Lavrov is saying, "No, that's not true." So I don't know. I'm just going to take that as a W, even though Nunya's not here to push back and explain what he meant. So
no, my brief answer is you are wrong.
What concessions has Russia offered?
Wait a second, please. I have been emphasizing repeatedly in relation to Ukraine, in relation to strategic relations with the United States, I have been emphasizing our readiness to seek balance of interests. If this is not what your station considers readiness for negotiations, then
he repeats it again.
I don't know how to be even less eloquent in trying to be brief in my answers.
Well, there have been very clear, specific things said by the Trump administration, such as the vice president saying that the current lines of contact in Ukraine would freeze and end up fairly close to where troops are right now. Do you actually consider that a concession?
I don't discuss publicly the details of what is being subject of negotiation.
Yeah, I can see why she would be so pissed off.
I understand that you love rumors, because rumors are...
The Vice President of the United States said it on camera.
I would be irked if I were her too.
Was it a question?
Well, rumor. You said it was a rumor. The Vice President said it. Perhaps you missed it.
I said about us. We are not discussing things which are subject to negotiations.
Okay. Minister Lavrov, thank you for your time this morning.
Yeah, dude.
Thank you.
It's I guess the positive part about me having to finish this and having to go through and the next day and get it all looked at and stuff is that you could see how some of the tricks, right, tricks that he used, and some of the tricks that she used, and she wasn't it didn't work out, right? So like he definitely, like if this was a boxing match or a fencing match, he definitely outclassed her. You could definitely feel that experience. Not to say that she did a bad job. I think that for as much as she can, I mean, let's be honest, she's coming up against the heavyweights, Lavrov, right? So the Lavrov, they call him the boss, whatever. So yeah, I mean, that's probably, I don't know if there are other hosts in Face the Nation, like I said earlier, but if there are, then they probably picked the right one, because she did as good of a job, I think, as could be expected. But okay, so real quickly before we wrap up, I'm going to go take a look at the North Korean troops thing, right? Because here's the thing about rumors and stuff, right? The thing about North Korean troops is that I always said, and you guys can take a look back at our past DPA open mic, and I might have even said it on mine and Nanya's podcast, that why wouldn't there be North Korean troops? Like that was always my attitude. Like, why not? It's in Kursk. It's in Russian territory, right? It's not like they're on Ukrainian land. You can't say that North Koreans are invading Ukraine or anything like that. The North Koreans would probably love to have hands-on experience, have the ability to understand modern warfare, sharpen their tactics up a bit. And from what I've heard, from what I've read, it looks like that they have done that. Like their tactics have improved. So and adapted. So I'll just take there's so many stories about it over the past couple of days, but I just took one that was kind of short, relatively short. NBC News, right? So we know more or less what to expect. So Russia acknowledged for the first time that North Korean troops were on the front lines of its war with Ukraine, with a senior military official creating their role in helping Russian forces reclaim control of the Kursk region. Would like to separately note the participation of military personnel of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Valery Gerasimov, Russian Chief of General Staff, told Putin. So Gerasimov said it, and it was like, I can't remember for the Russians to actually deny that there were North Korean troops. Now that I think about it, I think maybe like in the alternative media space on Twitter, I think that's where you had, I think about like Scott from Calibrated, people like that. I don't know what his position was on it, right? I just think of those kinds of guys, and they were basically, they were pretty sure that there weren't North Korean troops. And I mean, you can't blame people because there wasn't really any evidence, any substantial evidence that could be used to actually prove that if there were North Korean troops. But I mean, my position all along was that they're probably there. And it looks like they were. So let's see here. That added that under a comprehensive strategic partnership between the two countries, North Korean soldiers provided significant. So basically, they have a strategic partnership that was signed in 24, I think. So last year, if one country is under attack, the other one can come and help or something like this. And the Russians are under attack, and the Koreans came in to help, I guess. Putin congratulated his military in a statement from the Kremlin, saying that the full defeat of the enemy in the Kursk border region creates conditions for further successful actions by forces on other important parts of the front. Of course, I think that my own opinion on the Kursk thing is that, I think the Russians were caught flat-footed, but I think they probably weren't caught as flat-footed as people think. I think they saw that Ukraine was doing something stupid, so they tried to not overreact and maybe just underestimated what would happen. But in the end, as we can see, it really, really ended up biting Ukraine in the butt more, because recently, like, there's talk about mobilization of people that are above the age of 60. So it had its results. Okay, in March, South Korean officials reported that between January and February, North Korea had sent an additional 3,000 troops to Russia after 4,000 of them were believed to have been killed or injured. So this is another interesting. I wonder if it'll tell me in this article, but apparently the Russians said something about there being approximately 4,000, I believe, North Korean casualties. Shortly after the Trump administration temporarily suspended military intelligence to Kiev in March, Russian forces intensified their attacks on Ukrainian troops in the territory. So the Russians took back. When was the pipeline operation? Let me look this up. It was a 14-kilometer or 16-kilometer pipe operation. I'll say it's 14-kilometer pipe operation. When was this? 14-kilometer pipe operation, Ukraine war. Yes, I want to know when this happened. It wasn't that long ago. Let's see. It was... Okay, well, this story came out on March 9th. All right. No, it was updated on March 9th. Well, before March 9th. Whatever. I'm not... I don't remember. I should know this, but... So after a while, it starts to all blend in together. Yeah. So basically, in March, that's when the freaking pipeline operation happened. The reason why Ukraine lost Kursk was not because the Trump administration temporarily suspended military and intelligence assistance to Kiev. It's because the Russians did a crazy pipeline operation where like 600 of them ended up coming up behind Ukrainian lines. And it turns out the Ukrainians had their own crazy pipeline operation going on at the same time. The Russians just kind of beat them to it. So this has nothing to do with the Trump administration. They're just saying that. They're just like, and just throw that in an extra dig. Why not? It's NBC. Ukraine has not yet responded to Putin's claim, but losing control of the western Russian region would be a significant blow for Kiev, which Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has viewed as valuable leverage in any future peace talks. Yeah, I think that was part of the plan, but at least that's part of what they say. It's part of the excuse. But okay, anyway. Russia's formal acknowledgement of North Korea's involvement in the war in Ukraine comes as Trump has intensified efforts to broker a ceasefire between Moscow and Kiev to end the conflict, which escalated with Russia's full-scale invasion 3 years ago. So yeah, this is, if you ever hear, you know how you know the Russian invasion of Ukraine was not full-scale and not unprovoked? Because they always say unprovoked and full scale. That's how you know. And they have to say it like that every time. They're just like brainwashing you. The Trump administration has also doubled down on demands that Ukraine agree to give up some territory to Russia, including parts of Crimea, as part of the truce, which Zelensky has squarely rejected. Parts of Crimea? I wonder. You mean they mean Crimea? Zelensky and Trump earlier Saturday held what the White House described as a, quote, very productive meeting in Rome ahead of the funeral of Pope Francis. A good meeting, Zelensky said in a post on X, adding a very symbolic meeting that has the potential to become historic if we achieve common results. So yeah, I think that this North Korean troop stuff, it's probably like I wonder if the timing is significant or not. I can't know. But just pointing out that always pay attention to official statements. Always be paying attention to official statements. You are not going to be. So I mean, everybody lies, right? But I mean, it's the Russians are pretty like shockingly like reliable about things if you pay attention to the language. So a lot of the like. I didn't hear official statements. Like they could maybe mock that the notion of the Russians needing North Korean troops, but not without denying it, you know, especially in some kind of official capacity. So, and if I had seen them flat out say no, like Vladimir Putin say like they're not North Korean troops, there never have been. We don't plan to have this kind of cooperation with them. I would have thought that was significant, But even still, there was a little bit of evidence with like North Korean artillery and things like this. So anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. I don't want to do 2 scoops of crazy without Nunya, so we're gonna have to do 4 scoops of crazy next time. And like apologize for having to do this this last leg of it by myself. But anyway, peace.